Good morning, students. So today we are going to deal with the topic protein, how to determine sequences of a protein, or you can say the primary structure of protein. Um, Before that, I would like to tell you how a protein is isolated and how we proceed towards this. This is a kind of experiment, right? So I'll tell you how to proceed towards this experiment. First of all, we try to isolate a protein. Now, in isolation of protein, it's similar to your nucleic acid isolation, wherein you have to break open the cell. Now, after breaking the cell, then you get fragments of proteins. The cell membrane proteins. You will get carbohydrates, you'll get fats, so all these things, nucleic acids. So from that you have to take out your protein mixture. Now the complete sum total of protein which is present in a cell is considered as proteome. So actually we need to isolate proteome. So by various chromatographic techniques and by various purification techniques, we isolate the proteome mixture from this subcellular fragments. And after isolating that, then we have to isolate our protein of interest. For that we use specific purification techniques, for example HPLC, or you can use affinity chromatography, you can use sequence tag based chromatography, you can use some other techniques also in order to isolate your protein of interest. Now once your protein of interest is isolated, then you check for the purity, whether your your sample contains only your protein of interest or not. Now after doing that qualitative analysis using any kind of analytical technique, for example Lorry's methods, or any kind of calorimetric estimation you can do, and ultimately your protein of interest is in your hand. Now after that, what we need to do? Why we need that protein? Because we want to know the structure of the protein, and after knowing the structure of the protein, we'll be able to actually find out the function of that protein. So initially we have to know the structure of the protein. Now a protein has 4 types of structure: primary structure, secondary structure, tertiary structure, and quaternary structure. Primary structure is nothing but it's just like a bead in a string. So it's the sequence of amino acids which is present, which actually forms the protein. Then secondary structure is something which is the first kind of structure which is formed when a protein is synthesized. Now as soon as protein is synthesized, it comes out of the ribosome and it takes up a kind of conformation, and that is nothing but your secondary structure. Usually we say alpha helix and beta pleated sheets. Now after that, once the protein is formed, it comes out of the ribosome, and there it tries to take up a tertiary structure. Now each polypeptide will try to take up a tertiary structure either with the help of some chaperones or on its own. So there are 2 types of proteins depending upon the kind of structural formation goes. So one will undergo self-folding, another one requires the help of chaperones for folding, and later on if the protein requires too many other subunits, so this polypeptide will try to take help from some other subunits. So many different subunits will come in, join in, and then you will get a quaternary structure or a 4-degree structure. Now example of a tertiary structure is your myoglobin, and quaternary structure is your hemoglobin. So that is how. Now after this structure, if once you know the structure, you can find out the function. So the first and foremost thing is to find out the primary structure of protein. Now in order to find out the primary structure of protein, we actually have to find out the protein sequences. So herein I'm going to play you an animation, and I'll tell you I'll brief you the different ideas also how to sequence a protein. So right now I'm starting with that animation. Okay, so this is how we can start over. Now initially I'll tell you, whenever we get a protein of interest, the first and foremost thing is to denature the protein, so that all other disulfide bonds or other bonds whichever are there, which is responsible for the formation of tertiary structure or secondary or quaternary structure, should be removed. So you'll have a protein chain. Okay, it's just a chain, and now in that chain you can use for finding out the sequences. So first and foremost step is your denaturation of protein. So here we have a sequence of 7 steps. okay, through which we can sequence our protein. So first one is your denaturation of the protein. Denaturation of protein means removal of the non-covalent bonds as well as some covalent bonds, for example disulfide bonds, from the tertiary structure of protein, so that it will be converted to a primary structure. Now after that, since in a protein there are your cysteine molecules there, and cysteines will join together to form to have that disulfide bond. So if disulfide bond is there, protein will once again form the tertiary structure. So what we need to do, we need to break that disulfide bond, and then we need to cover that disulfide bond. This is done by alkylation and reduction of the disulfides. Okay, now by reduction you can break that disulfide bond, and by alkylation you cover that SH group on cysteine. So now this cysteine is not available for making disulfide bond once again. After that, we try to determine the subunits which is present with the protein. Since for example, if we have isolated say hemoglobin, we don't know how many subunits are there. So we need to find out how many different polypeptide chains are present in that protein, because each polypeptide will make up one subunit. So we have to determine that subunit before proceeding towards the actual sequence determination. Then we need to cleave the protein, the primary structure of the protein in small fragments, because it will be easier to sequence small fragments than to sequence a complete say 120 or 130 amino acid long chain. So it will be easier. And finally we'll undergo Adman degradation. So we'll slowly will break each peptide bond, and we'll try to find out which amino acid is there, and then ultimately this is a restructure of the sequence, which is the last step. So we'll try to align sequences using our bioinformatics tools, and then we'll try to assign disulfide bonds in that chain in order to find out, yes, these two cysteine molecules are involved in disulfides and all, and ultimately we will get the primary structure of our protein. So here we start with the denaturation part. Okay.
Before fragmenting the protein, it must be denatured. That is, it must be unfolded from its compact globular shape into an extended linear form to make it more accessible to attack by chemical and enzymatic reagents. Here, each amino acid in the protein is drawn as a single sphere. Eating the protein or adding substances such as urea will denature most protein.
No. This protein was actually a normal protein which has got so many different types of covalent and non-covalent bonds. So what happened, they added urea in order to denature the protein. Now urea will do what? It will remove all the non-covalent bonds. It will not be involved in removing covalent bonds, but just it removes all non-covalent bonds. Now if a non-covalent bond between this amino acid and this amino acid is removed, your protein is now fully you can say denatured. So this is what is done right now. You just check that.
Proteins. However, the resulting unfolded chain is not yet ready for analysis. Many proteins have disulfide crosslinks between cysteine side chains, drawn here as yellow spheres. These must be cleaved to facilitate the sequence determination.
Okay, now initially what we did, we removed all the non-covalent bonds. Now the next step is removal of the covalent bond. Now covalent bond between covalent bond example here is the disulfide bond. So the next step, that is the reduction and alkylation of disulfide. Now reduction of disulfide means breaking disulfide bond, and alkylation of disulfide means we are trying to cover that cysteine group so that it should not go back and once again form that disulfide bond. So ultimately we'll have a linear chain of amino acids, and it will be very easy to actually determine the sequence of a linear chain of amino acids.
A common way to cleave disulfide bonds is to add the reducing agent 2-mercaptoethanol. Under suitable conditions, two of these mercaptoethanol molecules react to cleave a disulfide link in a polypeptide by forming a disulfide.
Now, what has happened? Mercaptoethanol was added. Now mercaptoethanol has done what? It has given its H to your cysteine, and when it has given that H to the cysteine molecule, cysteine underwent reduction, and at the same time mercaptoethanol underwent oxidation, and after this oxidation you have a kind of a compound in which two mercaptoethanol molecules are interlinked by a disulfide bond. So you can see or you can just understand that the disulfide bond which was present here, it shifted to your mercaptoethanol. It's just the same way. Okay, the earlier this disulfide bond was present with this polypeptide. Now this disulfide bond is present with mercaptoethanol. Okay, now
sulfide bond between themselves. Effectively, the disulfide bond is transferred from the polypeptide to the mercaptoethanols. The newly liberated sulfhydryl groups must then be chemically protected to prevent the reformation of disulfide bonds through air oxidation. This is often done by treatment with iodoacetic acid, an alkylating agent which reacts with cysteine residues to form S-carboxymethylcysteine, a compound.
Okay, now what has happened now? After this reduction of the disulfide bond, iodoacetic acid is added. Now iodoacetic acid is doing what? It's trying to make a contact with the cysteine. So it is actually covering cysteines. It is alkylating cysteine, and once it alkylates cysteine, this I will go out with H. Okay, so HI will be released. So you see how it is happening?
And that is unreactive under the conditions to which the polypeptide will subsequently be exposed. Take a moment to examine the fully denatured protein. Convince yourself that it is indeed a linear chain from one end to the other. When you are ready to continue, click on the Next button.
Okay, so I think this is very much clear to all of you that the first step in protein sequence determination is to denature the protein, and then reduction of those amino acids, and ultimately alkylating the sequences, right? Now the next step is to determine the subunits, whether this protein, the protein on which we are working, it is a single polypeptide chain, or whether it is a combination of say one or more polypeptide. Now how it can be done? Just to find out the amino terminal ends. If a protein had say only one amino terminal end, that means it has got only one polypeptide. But if a protein has got say 3 amino terminal ends, that means it has got this protein is made up of 3 different polypeptides. So we need to know how many polypeptides are there in the protein of interest.
At this point, we must determine how many different types of subunits the protein we are dealing with contains. Since each peptide chain has only 2 ends, identifying how many unique terminal groups there are will tell us how many non-identical subunits we are dealing with. In a common technique, the N-terminal amino acid is reacted with dansyl chloride. The resulting dansyl polypeptide is then hydrolyzed under acidic conditions so as to completely degrade it to its component amino acids. With its N-terminal
How it is done? It is actually the protein is reacted by dansyl chloride. Now dansyl chloride has an ability to go and bind to the amino acid present at the N-terminal region. So if the polypeptide has got only one N-terminal region, so it will go and bind to that amino acid. Now the protein of interest which we are working on right now, as an example, it has got only one amino terminal region. So this dansyl chloride has gone and attached to that amino terminal, the amino acid present at the amino terminal region. Now after after that, acid hydrolysis is done. Acid hydrolysis is done just to make sure that all the amino acids are released from the protein, and these amino acids will be actually separated, and then we'll try to find out which amino acid is present at the N-terminal region. Now this information we can use further when we want to reconstruct our sequence. When we are doing this, at that point in time we need to know this information, that which amino acid is present at the N-terminal region. Okay.
terminal residue is still a highly fluorescent dansyl amino acid. Here, the purple balls represent amino acids, and the dansyl group is represented by a yellow ball that is covalently linked to the N-terminal residue. The protein has now been converted to a mixture of single amino acids, one or more of which are labeled with the dansyl group. The next step is to separate out the highly fluorescent dansyl labeled residues and identify the amino acids to which they are attached. This can be done by a variety of chromatographic techniques. Here we use an HPLC apparatus set up specifically for amino acid separation and identification. The sample is injected, and the dansyl labeled residue in yellow separates from the others as it passes through the column. Its relative elution volume depends precisely on the amino acid to which it is attached, therefore identifying the N-terminal residue.
Now, what we have done after this acid hydrolysis, the amino acids are separated. Now amino acids are separated using HPLC. HPLC, one of the best available quantitative as well as qualitative measurement assay. So we can just separate our amino acids. Now after separation of amino acids, you can see these bands. Now these bands, they specifically tells us about the amino acid which are there, and this yellow band is is showing the specific amino acid associated with densyl chloride. Now just by looking at the peaks, we will come to know which amino acid is actually forming the N-terminal amino acid. Now anybody will have a query that how HPLC will help us in knowing this. Actually with HPLC we have these data that if an amino acid is alanine, then it will show what kind of graph, or if it is a proline, it will show what kind of graph. So already graph is there, a standard graph is there, and whatever we are getting, whatever information we are getting, we just try to compare it with the standard, and later on we will come to know, yes, which amino acid is associated with densyl chloride. Fine.
Here we detect only one densyl amino acid, indicating that our protein consists of only one type of polypeptide chain. More than one densyl labeled peak would have indicated that the protein consists of more than one type of polypeptide. These subunits would have to be separated from one another, usually by chromatographic means, before the subsequent steps of analysis could be carried out. Of course, there is a slight chance that two different polypeptides have the same N-terminal amino acid, in which case the conclusion that there is only one polypeptide chain would be erroneous.
Okay, so there will be a time that only one type of amino acid is isolated as the N-terminal amino acid, and maybe that protein has got 2 or 3 different polypeptides, but each of them are starting from the same amino acid. Then this does not give a clear-cut picture or an idea that yes, our protein has got 3 polypeptides and each polypeptide starts with the same amino acid. So this is actually the disadvantage of this process.